All right, I think we'll wait a few minutes for folks to join the room and then we'll get started. Hey, folks, we're just gonna wait a couple of minutes for everyone else to join and then we'll get started. Okay, I think we can go ahead and get us going. So hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for a messaging training specifically focused on Latino voters today. For folks who might not know us, my name is Caitlin Jury. I'm a research director at Equis Research, and my co-presenter today is Natalia Campos Vargas, our deputy research director, focused specifically on messaging. Our team at Equis works on lots of messaging research and content testing for Latino audiences so that we can support organizations that are really investing in Latino engagement programs. So really excited to be bringing you some of our greatest hits, as well as some fresher data from our work as part of the training today. Nearly all of the content you'll see today is publicly available on our website, but don't hesitate to reach out to us directly if you'd like to get more access to any of our work, or if you want to talk through how to implement some of these insights into your programming. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, I think there's a chat feature or Q&A feature where you can drop them. And so we should have plenty of time at the end to go through any questions that come up for any of you. But to start us off, I will pass it to Natalia.
Thank you, Caitlin. Okay, I'd like to get us started by going through our 5-step plan for winning Latino voters. The number one, sort of at the core of it all, is adopting a persuasion mindset. It is still possible to convince people, and we don't want to take people for granted. So that really lives at the top and sort of at the core of all of the things that we'll be talking about today. The second one is picking the right fights. So understanding what issues Latinos care about and with some help from this training, really focusing on the things that we know are particularly resonant and moving to Latino voters. Number three is providing new information. We always want to change the voting calculus that someone is making when they're showing up at the ballot box or when they're choosing to show up at the ballot box. So that is what that is all about. Number four is showing up. We mean a few different things by that, but it can be physically, it can be virtually, and it can be in Spanish, and more on that in a bit. And number five is inviting Latinos to the party without pandering. So that is making content that feels authentic, that is really reaching out to them specifically, and that is culturally competent. So we'll go ahead and start going through these. The first one I'll walk you through is inviting Latinos to the party. By what we mean by that is making Latinos feel included, having Latinos see themselves in the ads and the communications that you're serving them, and the many ways that this can be done. We understand that not all budgets are created the same, and maybe not everyone has the ability to make ads specific for Latinos for every sort of like small part of a coalition. So we ran a test which is the data that you see here on screen, to figure out how to get around it. So we made ads with sort of more generic scripts that did not mention in any way Latinos, but instead used visual Latino cues. I'll show you what that means in just a moment, but really adding things on screen that signal to Latinos. This video, this message, this thing that you're seeing is made for someone like you or with someone like you in mind. It is not, again, as I said, the script is not exclusive to Latinos, but it is really general. And you'll see here that when we ran those videos with Latino cues, we saw a pretty big difference on vote choice for Latinos specifically. But we also importantly saw that it made no difference with non-Latinos, so it didn't backlash. Um, we can go to the next slide. You'll see that we were using cues like prepared foods, ingredients, Spanish language on the screen, Latino workers as part of the B-roll in the videos. And we didn't see any sort of backlash. And we did see that we were priming Latino identity and moving Latinos to where we wanted them to be on vote choice. It was effective. It can be a cost-effective way of doing this as well. So we highly, highly recommend that you give that a try if you can. I can't show you the video because we couldn't figure out how to run it, but I'll throw it in the chat. Maybe I will throw it in the chat at the end. Yes, okay. The next principle I'd like to tell you about is the idea of showing up. So we mean a few different things by showing up. The first one that we want to talk about is the idea of serving more Spanish language content to Latinos, whether they are Spanish dominant or not. We know that Spanish serves multiple values for Latino audiences. The first one, the most obvious, clear one, is instrumental. We know that Spanish dominants need Spanish language outreach because it is what they understand. But we have found, and we have seen in other people's research as well, that conventional targeting tactics are not getting us full coverage with Spanish dominant Latinos. So what that means is through self-reported media consumption and through sort of like meta-analysis of previous research, we have found that really not all Spanish speakers are spending their time watching Telemundo or Univision, or they might not have their browser settings set to Spanish. So the money that is traditionally being spent in Spanish is not quite reaching all of the Spanish dominant Latinos that it could be reaching if it is limited to those more traditional targeting tactics. So that is the first reason why we recommend targeting Spanish content more widely to Latinos as a whole. The second one is its symbolic value. So we know that, like those cultural cues that I showed you a bit earlier, Spanish language can effectively boost perceptions of care and prime Latino identity, increase favorability, boost turnout, and really make a difference for all Latinos, not just those that are Spanish dominant. It is a way to signal investment. It is a way to signal care. And these are things that can be very persuasive to Latino audiences. So that'll be really valuable. Okay. And then the third reason why we should be running more Spanish content to Latino audiences in general is that there is no significant backlash or evidence of backlash among non-Latinos or non-Spanish speakers. So if you're concerned about targeting more widely with Spanish language content, we really have not found that there is real concern about backlash from non-Spanish speakers who are served ads in Spanish. Okay, so in here, you'll see part of that symbolic value that Spanish can have on Latino voters. So we asked Latino voters if they agreed with these statements, and you'll see that a really significant majority of them did. One of these is when a political party or candidate communicates in Spanish, they are showing that they're interested in my vote. High agreement there. And when a political party or candidate communicates in Spanish, they are showing that they're interested in the Hispanics and our community. So again, it is a signal to audiences that shows care and investment in the Latino communities. which is something that is really, really valuable in persuading Latinos. And then, as I said earlier, we checked with broader audiences, comparing them to more traditional targeting with Spanish browser settings. And we really did not see any concerning signs of backlash for serving Spanish ads to broader audiences. Always a good thing to check. Another thing that's on people's minds a lot when we talk about language, something that we get a lot of questions about is the idea of using bilingual content. So instead of choosing English or Spanish, sort of running both side by side, or maybe using subtitles or things like that. And what we have found is that really it doesn't seem to perform any better than exclusively English or exclusively Spanish. So we don't really recommend going out of your way to make it. We know it can be, more expensive, more work. And really, our recommendation here continues to be to just, if you are trying to catch Spanish speakers, and even if you're just catching English dominant Latinos, running that wider Spanish targeting just gets you more value out of instead of making bilingual content. And then another big question that we get is whether Spanglish content can sort of get you the best of both worlds. Really, what we have seen in the research that we've done around Spanglish content is that it is really volatile. So you'll see here some, performing pretty poorly and some performing pretty well. And we've also had these shown to people in focus groups, people in different age ranges. And what we've seen is people either really hate it and think that it's pandering and see, sort of like feel like they can see right through it, or they think, oh, this is really cool and this is just sort of like how I feel and how I talk. But it's very, very volatile. So if you do want to use Spanglish Creative, we really want to strongly recommend that you test it before you run it. Okay, the next part of sort of showing up for Latinos is knowing where to show up. So, all through our research, polling, tests, and everything that we've done, we tried to ask people about media consumption because we're really curious to know where they're spending their time and getting their information. And really, over and over and over again, we see that YouTube just absolutely dominates media consumption for Latinos. You'll see here that nearly 8 in 10 Latinos are using YouTube on a typical week. So a huge share of Latinos are primed and they're ready to receive information on YouTube, whether that is paid media and ads or more organic content. We know that Latinos are spending a lot of their time on YouTube, and it's always, a big, big, big recommendation for us that if you're trying to reach Latinos, you try to find them there. Here you'll see media consumption for Spanish dominant Latinos, where YouTube is still definitely at the top of the chart. But What's Up is uniquely popular. I always feel like I pronounce that wrong, but it's the app that Meta owns for texting. So there, about 7 in 10 Spanish dominant Latinos are using YouTube in a typical week, and about the same number are using What's Up. So we know that it's a very popular app. People are on it to talk with their families, but it's also just a huge way of information sharing that feels a little maybe more rogue and like unknown in general. We learned recently that What's Up is going to allow ads soon. We're not sure if they will be allowing political ads or not, but it is definitely something to keep an eye on, especially as you try to find powerful tools to reach Latinos and specifically Spanish dominant Latinos. Okay, and then one last thing on the media consumption piece is we've seen a lot of discussion around following the election around voters who are maybe less engaged in politics, who don't follow politics closely. We see that those who are less engaged are we're more likely to shift toward Trump. So we want to make sure that we're reaching these not engaged voters or less engaged voters and understand where they are. We see that more Latinos who don't follow politics are listening to Spanish radio or watching Spanish TV, using What's Up, and those who are plugged in are listening to podcasts and live TV. So everyone is talking about finding a Joe Rogan of the left, maybe it would seem that, maybe a podcast is actually not the way to engage those who are not so engaged and not so plugged in, and those who we see are shifting the most. So something to think about there. I think with that, I'll pass it on to Caitlin.
Awesome. Thanks, Natalia. And I'll just say we will make the slides available after the presentation, and you should be able to watch the video that we couldn't get to play as part of the follow-up also. We'll get to the rest of the questions in the Q&A. So in addition to connecting culturally and meeting voters where they spend time online, we also need to make sure that we're messaging on the right things. And like Natalia said at the top, sharing new information in our efforts to persuade Latino voters. So we'll start first by taking a look at the current issue landscape. As you can see, Latino voters share lots of similar priorities as other voters. The economy and cost of living continue to be top of mind. The way we ask this question at ECIS is actually open-ended. So voters are asked to tell us what they think the most important issue facing the US today is, and then we'll bucket their responses after the fact. So from an open-ended question, you can see that economy, jobs, cost of living altogether make up almost half of the responses we got from voters. When it comes to economic messaging recommendations, we at ECIS are huge fans of the winning jobs narrative framework, mostly because we've seen how effective it can be with Latino voters as well as with all voters. So if you aren't familiar with the winning jobs narrative framework, definitely recommend checking out the resources on their website. Winning Jobs has several components to their overall framework, but I just wanted to call out these three in particular. So first, the most effective economic message really centers working people and working people's experiences. We've also specifically tested this engines of the economy language, and sometimes we've even heard it repeated back to us from voters in focus groups. We've tested them in message tests and in polling, and we found it to be especially resonant and effective. So thinking about Latino voters and Latino working people as engines of the economy and really centering them in our message is really effective for economic outreach. Second, we need to be reflecting shared values, specifically when it comes to the economy, focusing on personal responsibility and hard work, as well as obviously family. Latinos don't want help or handouts in how we talk about economic support. They want to feel like their leaders see and value their hard work, and that their leaders recognize that they themselves have the power to improve their lives and the lives of their families, which really connects to this last piece here about respecting personal agency. So again, we should be positioning working people as heroes, as the center of the story, not the government. And we should talk about government giving people tools and opportunities to get ahead through their own hard work, not help or handouts. We've seen the winning jobs framing work over the last several years, but here's a concrete example for how to use it to talk about something that's happening now, which is the latest reconciliation bill. As I'm sure folks have seen, connecting Medicaid cuts to more tax breaks for billionaires has been a theme in recommendations for how to talk about the big, beautiful bill across the progressive space. And so here in this first message, you can see how the folks at Winning Jobs and Immigration Hub were able to do that work of connecting Medicaid cuts to additional tax breaks for billionaires, but they talked about it as cuts for tools for working people to build good lives. So when we tell Latino voters about the effects of the bill, we should really focus on cuts to those tools for working people, all in favor of tax breaks for billionaires. If we go back to that issues landscape slide, you can also see that immigration ranks in the top 3 for Latino voters. We've been doing a ton of research on immigration over the past several months for obvious reasons. So I'll focus the rest of the issues section here on our latest insights. We will have more on the economy very soon. We're expecting some fresh data back in the next couple of weeks. So if you're interested in more updates for us or more specifically on economic messaging, feel free to reach out and let us know. Happy to share more. Okay, so to start us off on this immigration piece, in our latest poll that we conducted earlier this year, we asked voters to tell us what they think is most important for Congress specifically to focus on when it comes to immigration right now. Of all the options listed here on your screen, a plurality of Latino voters told us that it's most important for Congress to protect law-abiding undocumented immigrants from being deported. But of course, Latinos, like all Americans, want to feel safe. And when you sum up the circled numbers on this slide, you can see half of the Latino voters we talked to choose an option that includes at least some focus on border security or enforcement. So most of it is coming from this 26%, which is really a balanced approach that includes enforcement but isn't enforcement only. And then the rest come from these two 12% options at the bottom that are really enforcement only approaches. But really reflecting back to us from our voters, from our community, that safety is a concern. In a way, this safety concern may actually be contributing to the perceptions of overreach we're seeing from Latinos when it comes to Trump's actions. Safety isn't just about the border or border security. The broad detentions and deportations that we're seeing today are also making Latinos feel unsafe. 65% of Latinos agree that Trump's immigration agenda will increase racial profiling and target all Latinos, making it difficult for hardworking Latinos to feel safe. So Latinos want to feel that the border's under control, but they also don't want to worry that they'll be unfairly targeted by enforcement efforts just because they happen to be Hispanic. That's why time and again, over the past year or so, if not several years, the closest Latinos have come to consensus in research is in wanting to see a balanced approach to immigration, one that makes their community safer and protects hardworking immigrants and their families. We asked the same question about what Congress should focus on that I showed you before, but this time we just asked whether or not voters agreed that each was important instead of forcing them to choose. And in this case, you can see 85% of Latinos think it's very or somewhat important for Congress to take a balanced approach that both improves security at the border, but also ensures humane treatment of immigrants. And for what it's worth, we're seeing the same kind of pattern among all registered voters, not just Latino voters. Even among all voters, a balanced approach is the most popular. So while it's important for us to understand what our voters want our leaders to do, we also wanted to understand the best ways that outside groups could message on overreach, on the administration's overreach in this moment. So in this part of the poll, we asked voters to tell us which of the reasons listed they agreed with as an argument against mass deportations. The strongest agreement came from the messages that focused on the impacts of mass deportations on hardworking long-term immigrants and their families. You can see 73% of Latinos agree that mass deportations will tear families apart, many of whom have been in the US for a long time. And 71% agree that deportation would unfairly impact undocumented immigrants who are law abiding members of society, who work hard and pay taxes. We had also been asked a bunch about how to connect immigration and the economy together. So you can see at the bottom of your screen here, there's a couple of frames that reference the cost and chaos of mass deportations and the impact of deportations on workforce, supply chains, and rising prices. This 64% agreement is not a rejection of the frame at all, but it does seem to be less effective relative to human costs that really focus on families and hardworking immigrants. Again, even among all registered voters, so we were able to take a look at the comparison, we see that fairness and families really do stand out. So focusing on the unfair impact of broad deportations on working people and families is effective with Latinos, but also as a broadcast message. As a follow-up to the poll, we also ran a message test with Swayable to see if our approach was actually shifting Trump approval beyond just agreement with something in a survey. We actually just got this data back last week, if not the week before. And we found again that the focus on families and kids in particular was most effective across the board with non-Latinos. So that's what this all voters column is. It includes Latinos, but also other racial groups with Latinos in English and with Latinos in Spanish. The other option you're seeing here is a message that was really focused on the impacts on hard workers, includes references to racial profiling, and specifically talks about people who are getting picked up by ICE at scheduled court hearings. You can see that it was effective in English with all voters and with English-speaking Latinos, and was directionally effective in Spanish. But it does seem from this message test anyway that the focus on families and kids really feels like the most effective approach to communicating on the human impact of mass deportations in general. And obviously the best way to do that is through storytelling. And we've already started to see in this analysis from G. Elliott Morris what the impact of sustained and strategic storytelling can be on Trump approval in the short term. So here you can see the more we talked about Kilmar Abrego Garcia's story in the media, the lower Trump's approval on immigration got. But the minute we let up and we let them reset the narrative, his approval seems to slightly bounce back. So it's important that we all continue to communicate on the human costs and human impact of the Trump administration's overreach in a sustained and strategic way. And again, the best frame for doing that is really to focus on the unfair impact it's having on law-abiding, hardworking people and their families. So to close us out, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the importance of adopting a persuasion mindset when it comes to Latino voters. For a long time, we treated Latinos as mobilization targets only, but shifts in the electorate over the past few cycles have proven that Latinos are swing voters that need to be persuaded and fought for. Latinos shifted more in their support relative to other groups compared to 2016 and are a fast growing piece of the electorate. So fighting for Latino voters is more critical now than ever. As communicators on the outside of official politics, it can be difficult to see what role we can play in that fight. But one thing we can do right now, as painful as it may be for some of us, is to avoid shaming Latino voters who voted for Trump or Republicans in the past. The only way to stop the shift or to improve it is to win back voters that we've lost. So let me walk you through an example of what that could look like on an issue like immigration for this year. So I mentioned earlier that we're starting to see signs that Latinos believe Trump is overreaching when it comes to immigration. Here you can see the data to support that. In our poll, we offered respondents these two options. One that describes Trump's actions as good and fair and offers, some people who are not criminals end up suffering because of it, then that's the price to pay to ensure safety. And then the other option described his actions as going too far and targeting the types of immigrants who strengthen our nation. 66% of Latinos chose the too far message. So 2/3 of Latinos currently believe Trump has gone too far on deportations. Even among Biden defectors, we define Biden defectors as Latino voters who voted for Biden in 2020, but switched to vote for Trump in 2024. So by definition, Biden defectors, 100% of Biden defectors voted for Trump this past November, and 64% now believe he's gone too far. Among all Trump voters, that number is 36%. So a little over a third of all Trump voters are telling us that they think he's gone too far on deportations. These perceptions of overreach actually aren't that surprising when you consider the view of new Trump voters on immigration in general. 65% of new Trump voters told us they believe Trump would only target recent arrivals and criminals, not that the administration would target everyone. And when you look at actual support for deporting all undocumented immigrants, only about a third of new Trump voters agreed, compared to 53% of all Trump voters. So these voters are not supportive of broad deportations, and they honestly didn't think that Trump's plans were to target everyone, however frustrating that might be for some of us to hear. There's a real opportunity if we're willing to understand the views of these folks instead of meeting them with blame and shame. If we adopt a persuasion mindset and truly try to understand the values, preferences, and experiences of these voters, we can start to build a plan for winning them back. So with that, I will pass it back to Natalia to close us out.
Thank you, Caitlin. So our 5 steps, again, to winning and winning back Latino voters are adopting a persuasion mindset, not taking people for granted, picking the right fights, whether that is long-term immigrants, healthcare costs, or other things that we know are good for Democrats, providing new information to change a voter's voting calculus, showing up physically, virtually in Spanish, where people are spending their time, and inviting Latinos to the party without pandering and instead using culturally competent content. So to wrap us up, just a few recommendations of all of the things that we've talked through today. The first one being include Latinos in your messaging, whether that's visually or verbally. Target Spanish outreach widely. Test bilingual content to ensure that it will not backlash. Meet Latinos where they are, namely on YouTube. Share new information with voters to change their voting calculus. Use relevant and moving stories to prove your point. There are, unfortunately, a lot of stories out there right now, and we really do see that there is a difference in putting a name in a face to some of the horrific things that are happening. When addressing the economy, put Latinos at the center of your messaging, show respect for their agency and their work, put the government in a supportive role. And on immigration, focus on the effect that Trump's overreach is having on immigrant families and children. Both of those, of course, um, stories will make a huge difference for both of those for sure. And then lastly, lean into a persuasion mindset with Latino audiences. Um, for my final plug is our Latino Playbook website, where all of this information lives and where new information coming from Ekis will be as well. So that is ekisplaybook.com. We also have a little bit of mobilization, some targeting things, and recommendations there. So please feel free to check them out. But as Caitlin said, also feel free to email us, reach out if you have any questions, if you'd like to talk through any of this, if you'd like us to discuss things that you're planning, anything that you think that we could be helpful we'd be more than happy. You can find our emails and our contact information on that website as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Natalia. Okay, I've seen a couple of questions come through, so we can start there. But if you have additional questions, I think there's some glitch with the Q&A function. So if you have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat instead. We can see both of them, so we'll get to all your questions if you have them. I'll start with Barbara's question. We just didn't include Blue Sky on the list of options. It was a closed-ended question. We offer that set of options that you saw on your screen, and we just didn't offer Blue Sky as an option. I haven't seen other outside sources about Blue Sky's popularity among voters. In focus groups, we ask more open-ended questions to try to make sure we're capturing new patterns or new trends, and Blue Sky has never come up in a focus group. But we can certainly look around and see if we can find any Latino specific data on Blue Sky. The other question I saw here, is there any data on what specific actions Latinos would want a candidate to take or support to protect Latino families and workers? So like I said a little bit in the immigration section, the most obvious one is for candidates to really start pushing for a balanced approach to immigration. It's clear that Latinos are concerned about safety and security. And so ignoring those things in favor of only talking about pathways to citizenship, for example, feels like a missed opportunity to really connect with the fears and preferences of the Latino voters that we talk to all the time at Ekis. But going enforcement only is also not a good option, like an over focus on border security or even targeted enforcement without also talking about protections for people who've been here for a long time, undocumented spouses of American citizens, for example. There are lots of opportunities to propose policies that would take care of folks who have been here for a long time and keep families together while also prioritizing security and enforcement in some way. We do have some more work to do, I will say, like across the space to get even more specific on what particular policies work well. But in the absence of that, I think just encouraging leaders to start pushing for balanced approaches in even how they talk about immigration or the vision that they have for immigration policy moving forward feels like our primary recommendation. On the economy, this is actually the main question we had about in our economy research that I kind of previewed or mentioned that we'll be getting data back from in the next couple of weeks. So we're hoping to be able to offer some more specific recommendations for specific policies to think about. But Latinos, like all voters, want the cost of living to come down. Housing has come up a lot in our research in the past. The cost of prescription drugs has come up a bunch. Like all the same things, Latinos live in the same economy that other voters live in. And so all the same concerns and priorities that like other voters have around bringing down costs and affordability in general are definitely common in the conversations that we have with Latino voters. Anything you'd add, Natalia?
No, you had it.
Okay, and then last question I'm seeing here for now, is it worth trying to shift many of the right-wing narratives on immigration that seem to have taken hold, like control of the border and the worst of the worst? I think if I'm understanding your question correctly, Eric, I think the main thing for us to push back on, and the way we can do that is through this storytelling piece that we're really trying to push, is that the Trump administration is focusing on violent criminals. We all know that that is not true. I don't think that was ever the plan. There's just this like overwhelming perception, again, especially among new Trump voters, folks who voted for Trump for the first time really thought he was only going to target violent criminals and recent arrivals. the more we can show folks through individual stories, instead of just telling them that's not who they're targeting, the more they can see individual stories and they start collecting a library in their brains of all these stories of people that they don't think should be detained and deported, the more we can start to shift that perception that the administration is focusing on like the right people. So that would be my main recommendation. Oh, I see one more. How do Latino voters and potential voters feel about the Lake and Riley Act? Is that on their radar? Are they angry with the Democratic reps who voted in favor? And how about HR 488, anti-Semitism, thanking ICE for their service? So I don't think we don't have specific research on either of those things. I will say again, not to be repetitive, but the focus on security and safety is a big one. I think Democrats have a lot of opportunity to propose their own version so that we're not saying yes to a Republican proposal like the Lake and Riley Act. But the root of the things that Republicans are addressing in the Lake and Riley Act is something that Latino voters are telling us they're experiencing as a gap from Democrats. So I don't know what support looks like for the Lake and Riley Act itself. I don't think it was very well known or heard about among voters generally, but I don't think we should undercount the way that the Lake and Riley Act could resonate with voters, given this like gap in addressing fears around safety and security. Yeah, Eric, totally. So framing things as a broad crackdown on immigration makes everyone less safe rather than targeted actions against actual criminals. Is definitely in line with how we're thinking, what we're hearing from voters, and what we think would be really effective moving forward. You know, when the Kilmar Abrego Garcia conversation was really prominent online and in political spaces, there were a lot of messages that talked about the threats to due process violations to everyone. Like if they can do it to Kilmar Abrego Garcia, they can do it to you too. And so talking about how overreach and like violations of due process impact everyone and makes everyone less safe uh, is definitely an effective way to think about communicating some of this overreach. Even on masks, you know, Senator Padilla and others have recently proposed uh, having ICE agents no longer wear masks when they do their enforcement activity. And when we talk about masks, demasking ICE agents, the way we should talk about it is like if impersonators are trying to act as ICE agents, that makes everyone less safe. And so taking masks off ICE agents allows for us to make sure that everyone is treated safely, that that no one's at risk of an impersonator coming to pick them up. So again, framing things as safety feels like a really important key to talking about immigration in this moment. The recent arrivals question is a tough one that we have been wrestling with for some time. I think there's a few things at play, but there's certainly more research to do. So for a long time, it's just true that there was a huge influx of arrivals at the border under the Biden administration. There's a global migration crisis. Like there's a lot of context we could offer, but it's just true that more people arrived at the border under the Biden administration relative to previous years. And there are so many undocumented immigrants in this country who feel like they've been waiting their turn, like folks have been here for decades and they don't feel like they've gotten access to resources in the same way they perceived that recent arrivals were getting them. And so there is some resentment, there is some like narrative shaping about like how we talk about recent arrivals or how Republicans were talking about recent arrivals that built resentment even among immigrants who had been in this country for a long time. Um, but I think there's work we can do to shift the narrative, to reframe the conversation around recent arrivals, but really it's about this like sense of skipping the line and then Democrats taking care of people who were skipping the line all while people were waiting their turn uh, to try to gain a pathway to citizenship or like any of the other promises from Democrats or others to take care of immigrants who had been here for a long time. Okay, I think I've answered everyone's question. Thank you, Barbara and Eric, for all your questions. Um, I can, while I'm talking for 20 more seconds, if any other questions come in, we can answer them, but just want to repeat If you want to find access to our public resources, you can go to ekisplaybook.com. I think you also have access to our emails as part of the app for Netroots. But if not, like Natalia said, our contact information is available on the Ekis Playbook website. We do this work so that other organizations can actually use it as part of their voter outreach programs, like I mentioned at the top. So we love to talk to folks about how to answer some of the questions maybe you still have, or how to implement some of this work as part of your broader outreach, or like working with folks who are running program directly. So we're very available and happy to talk to folks. And if you'd like to get added to any of our lists or anything so that we can share new research as it comes out, also don't hesitate to reach out. With that, I think we're all set. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate your time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.